Let's start the next Global Networking Forum session, if you agree. My name is Isabelle Duvaux-Béchon. I am in charge of Global Challenges and Partnerships Coordination at the European Space Agency, and I will have the pleasure to moderate this forum. Just to make an introduction, so Space for Global Challenges, as you all know, space is a tool that can address, in fact, many challenges, if not all, just listing a few of them here that you all know, and of course, in particular, if this works, can the Sustainable Development Goals, this chart was presented dozens of times since Friday, so you all know it, and we all know that space can support all these goals. Going to the next slide, please, because it doesn't seem this one is working. No, it does not work. Yeah. And just in particular mentioning also in Guadalajara since Friday, so there was the UN IAF workshop, there were several plenary sessions, there was a GNF early today, technical session and a lot of spin-offs, so many already activities that are linked to global challenges, societal issues, how space can help. So this forum is just one other example where you will give some elements. Going to the next slide. Why is... yeah. So why is global challenges? What we want to be sure is that our programs first, of course, allow the development of European industry and their excellence, this is fine, but also that they serve as much as possible the global challenges on Earth. In order, of course, that we make the best use of the funding that is provided by our member states. And what we think is that the possibilities offered by space and activities are not enough known. And we work on that, and we have taken some initiatives to make these activities better known. You can refer to papers I've done at UN workshop and IAC, but I will not present them today, it's not the purpose. And thus we organized this GNF session to present you some views at global level. So the choice was to have global presentations. And the next slide, we have the names of the four panelists. So two that will present the main view at international level, Barbara Ryan and Attila Matas, and I will present them later. One transversal view, which is the view of a continent and the needs of a continent with Africa. And then some elements on the recent activities at UN or IAF presented by Cristina Giannopapa. So just to start with, so to present Barbara Ryan before giving her the mic. She's the Secretary Director of the Intergovernmental Group on Earth Observation, the GEO, which coordinates the activities of, if I'm not mistaken, 102 member states, DEC, and 103 participating organizations, so really global level. Difficult, well, you can do better because there are states missing, but still it's quite good. You worked before in the World Meteorological Organization, in the US Geological Survey, and she has degrees in geology, geography, and civil engineering. Barbara?
Thank you very much, Isabel, and I'm going to try that pointer also. We'll see if I have any better luck. Welcome everyone this afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. Again, Barbara Ryan with the Group on Earth Observations, and plan to talk about space and applications for global challenges. And I guess for me, this is always kind of a nice place to start. Quote from William Anders, 1968, Apollo 8 astronaut, who says, you know what, we came all this way to explore the moon, and the most important thing we discovered was the Earth. And so I think this whole panel discussion is really about looking back on Earth and some of the challenges that we are in fact facing. You've probably all seen a slide like this. You'll see Arctic sea ice from, this is 1980, out to about 2015. The trend is pretty clear, although you can see seasonal differences certainly on that entire slide. And of course, you know the projections about when the entire Arctic may in fact be ice-free. And yet when we think about satellite or space-based observations, an image like this for global sea surface temperatures and how they change over the entire Earth is also quite meaningful. So I will say that, you know, we absolutely need in situ ground, atmospheric, marine-based observations, but I think we've heard all week that there's nothing like space-based observations to fill those interstices where you just don't have in situ observations. We in the group on Earth observations are building this global Earth observation system of systems, so you can see multiple platforms, space-based, atmospheric, oceanic, and terrestrial. And then you'll see that it's also an integration not only among those and between those platforms, but also among disciplines. And those little colors that you see at the bottom of this slide are in fact what I would say are disciplines. We happen to call them societal benefit areas. And so what we are about is ensuring that Earth observations and geospatial data really feed to each one of those societal benefit areas. And I hope you can see them going all the way from biodiversity and ecosystem sustainability all the way back around to water resources management. You saw this slide from Isabel, or one very close. These are the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and I guess what I would like to do is draw your attention to the text underneath these pictures. We, GEO, worked very closely with the UN Statistics Division in New York and a group called UNGGIM to in fact get these words into this document, and that is the importance and the wide range of data, including Earth observations and geospatial information. And while it may seem like an easy task to get these words into this document, it wasn't. And I guess what I want to say is that each of your governments are largely going to be responsible for responding to these sustainable development goals, but it will largely be managed out of your statistical agencies or your census bureaus, who may or may not know that you even exist or that you have capabilities that could in fact inform that process. So we worked really hard to get these words in there as a signal to those statistical agencies that there are capabilities elsewhere in your government that could help you with this task of measuring and monitoring progress among those 17 SDGs, or Sustainable Development Goals. This is a graph that was put together on one of our initiative teams, takes those 17 goals. May not be perfect, but it's just a sampling of the kinds of information along the top. We can make this available to you later in soft copy that shows you where there is data that could feed into some of those goals. Now, let's maybe just transition to a case study or two about where Earth observations really can have a substantial impact on global challenges, and that's the challenge of food security and, in fact, creating a food secure world. If you look at this graph, and it goes from about 1960 down along the bottom up to about 2012, 2013, and it's the monthly wheat prices from 1960 out to 2011, it says here. And look back at the 60s and 70s. We really had a fairly stable condition with pricing of wheat over that period. But then we start kind of the spikes that occur through time, and if you look out at this, certainly this last decade, then we're getting swings of maybe 3 times the pricing that occurred back in the 60s and 70s. Now, there's a lot of reasons for this and a lot of speculation, but I think certainly from our community, we do in fact feel that Earth observations could be fed into this process much earlier to create a more stable situation. So we happen to call it GeoGLAM, our Geo Global Agricultural Monitoring Effort. A number of countries, a number of participating organizations, and I should say we are not a UN organization, though you need to be recognized member state of the UN to join GEO. We don't need concurrence of those entire 103 organizations or 103 participating organizations or 103 members. A subset of countries and organizations that are interested in a particular topic can come and work together. And so this is an example where they're looking at a vegetation index for one day, August 13th, 2012, comparing the conditions on that day to the 10-year average before that. And so you can see droughts in the central United States, better, healthier vegetation in Canada along the border, droughts through Europe and over into Russia, and then a fairly healthy vegetation for the rice that's done in Asia. So the issue is, if we can do a snapshot like this on one day compared to the 10-year average, how come we aren't feeding that into the process much earlier? So we created this GeoGlam. The G20 agricultural ministers heard about it and said, okay, you guys, you've got Earth observations, but we need you to be working with the marketing people to start assigning values, pricing values to those crops. And this is now being produced operationally for AMIS, the Agricultural Marketing Information System, on a monthly basis. So you can drill into crops, again, NDVI across the globe, drill into a particular crop, happens to be rice on the 28th of August, and you can drill into a selected country and see crop conditions at that point. I can say that this information is now being fed in. I happened to participate in an AMIS meeting a month or two ago, and those, for the 4 major food crops, wheat, rice, corn, and maize, and soy, this data is being presented to the people that are in fact assigning cash values to those production estimates. So just maybe a couple other things real quickly. As we downscale to either Africa in an initiative called AfriGeos or to the Americas where we are right now, it is really important that if you want to influence decisions, many of those decisions take place at the national level or at the regional level. And so with an initiative called AmeriGeos, with these member countries, they are using GEO, an international framework, to target some of the issues that they are most interested in. I really want to just end on a couple points real quickly. Broad open data policies are core central for GEO. We absolutely believe that if taxpayer money paid for those satellites to be built, those stream gauges to be constructed, that the data that's being generated from those collection devices should be open to all citizens. So experience that I personally had in the United States is the Landsat story. First satellite went up in 1972, and for 30 plus years, the US sold Landsat data. $300 or $400 a scene when the government operated the satellites, $400 or $500 a scene when the government operated the satellites, $4,000 or $5,000 a scene when the private sector operated Landsats, 4 and 5 in the mid-'80s. And at the peak of data sales, 2001, we sold 53 scenes a day. Now, 53 scenes a day, 360 days a year, $400 a scene, that's a substantial amount of money, $4.5 million. My agency was taking in that, but it was not a good investment for the federal government. Who was buying those 53 scenes a day? Number one, other federal agencies. Number two, universities funded by the National Science Foundation. Number three, contractors funded by the Defense Department. So we were just recycling $4.5 million a year through one pocket into another, incurring administrative costs. Finally, we were able to convince the White House, Congress, and the Office of Management and Budget in 2007, give the data away. Just give it away over the internet, free at no charge, and this is what happened. 5,700 scenes a day to this day are being downloaded of Landsat data. This graph is a little bit old, says 25 million scenes. It's over 40 million scenes now globally of Landsat data, 2 orders of magnitude with that changed data policy. But the story for the US government was, and globally I would argue, 2011 when the economic analysis of this changed data policy was done, $1.7 billion of economic return to the US, $400 million outside the United States, for a global total of $2.1 billion, far exceeding the $4.5 million that one federal agency was collecting. So, in closing, what are people doing with that data? Australia has ingested the entire Landsat archive into a national computer center and working with their national flood risk information people are rectifying pixel by pixel, not scene by scene, but pixel by pixel, because the continent of Australia is moving, and a pixel today isn't in the same place a pixel was in 1984, and they're saying, put an algorithm in place that said, show me every pixel that has always been wet in that entire archive, show me every pixel that has been dry, show me every pixel that has been sometimes wet and sometimes dry, and let's assign colors or a histogram to that analysis. So landscape change is now being made possible to address global challenges if we can adopt broad open data policies. Australia is talking to Europe right now for ingesting the Sentinel data in. That satellite data, in situ data could go into this, and quite honestly, whether you do what Australia did and bring all this data into a national computer center, or whether you do what some people are doing on maybe Google Earth, 60,000 computers around the world, it's finally getting our information into analysis-ready form so that you can do these analyses. So 15 years of Landsat data, 133 scenes, you couldn't have 133,000 scenes. It would have cost you 1/3 of the cost of the satellite to buy the data to do this analysis, gotten it down to about 3 hours of compute time. How come we aren't doing this globally for global challenges for forest and land cover and urban area growth and transportation routes and any of the measurements for those sustainable development goals? So if we want to create a food secure world for this farmer or any young farmer or any other citizen of the globe, we need to move in this direction. We're fond of saying countries have borders, Earth observations don't. We need to leverage this. And then just lastly, our plenary is coming up in St. Petersburg, Russia in November. We sure would like to see you there. I'll stop. Thanks.
Thank you, Barbara. And I can say that at ESA also we have a free data policy, and that it is very important for the future. Now, after Earth observation, telecommunication, Attila Matas is the head of Space Publications and Registration Division in the International Telecommunication Union, ITU, often seen as the bad guys that don't allocate the frequencies that are needed by the operators. But okay, it's not the matter for today. You are representing the ITU at the UN COPIOS, for example, an international committee on global navigation satellite system. Of course, you participate to the World Radio Communication Conferences and all these type of events. And you hold a degree in radio engineering. And here, of course, it's not the question of the frequencies, but how telecommunication and ITU is helping with global challenges. Thanks.
Hello, good afternoon. I have quite easy task because after excellent presentation of Barbara, now I have a lot of arguments that, and you will understand my arguments now. First argument, I hope it's clear for you that everybody is happy to use the meteorology, Earth observation, and how it's important it was presented just now. But I hope all of you are aware of this, that without radio frequencies, this will be not possible. So please put in your mind and help to us to protect the frequencies, because if no spectrum, no global observations. This is absolutely crucial because for several specific space-based active and passive observations, the observation frequency bands are quite narrow because it's coming from the physical principles. And for this reason, I don't want to say big words, but for the whole humanity, it's necessary to protect these frequencies if we would like even to improve, to have even better, higher quality Earth observation. Just a sample for you, some of you probably know about it, that if you look to one tropical cyclone rain, that on the upper part, around 8 kilometers, which is mostly icy, it's sensitive for 85 gigahertz frequencies when the passive sensor is looking. For a heavy density rain in water in 4 kilometers, it's roughly the 1937 gigahertz band with special frequencies. And the lower part, the heavy rain, is very sensitive for the observation in 10 gigahertz. And the results you can see on the right side, the graphical imagination, how the data from the Earth observation satellites are implemented. They show you after, then you see it on TV, you see it in newspaper, you see it everywhere on internet. But please understand that this is behind this technology, the satellite-based Earth observation on specific frequencies using active and passive sensors are behind of these observations. As we are talking here about the challenges, and we speak that the space-based remote sensing are really global scale, long-term usage, and they are really, the space-based observation is the major role in the weather and climate prediction. Same for the disaster prediction, detection of disaster mitigation. Now even the tsunami and the ocean level can be detected from the Earth observation system. So it's a vital system for a global warning, early warning system, that nobody wants to repeat the tsunami which happened, that nobody expected. Kids, people were playing on the beach of the ocean when a tsunami came 5 minutes later without any warning to them. It's unacceptable to repeat anymore this situation. For this reason, the Earth observation system is playing really vital part of this. For you, just again, what is behind? I tried to show you some slides to understand what is behind it. The global observing system is collecting data from the geostationary satellite, polar orbiting satellites, NOAAs, you heard probably about it. After then from ocean buoys, from aircrafts, certainly from land systems, after the radars, wind radars, weather radars, and all is going to a network computer center where the data is concentrated and after then distributed for the whole world. The main thing, and okay, Barbara told the GEO is not part of UN as an agency, but I take GEO as part of our equal partners in various UN meetings, and where the UN agencies really acknowledge that the technologies for the monitoring of the Earth climate system is essential, and really how to prevent the monitoring and preventing whatsoever natural and man-made also disasters, because from satellite we can see also fire, other bad things which happened on the world. The other challenge, because I was requested to address some space-based challenges, it's not only the Earth observation, but also we have the category which is recognized by United Nations, especially also in ITU, of the least developed countries, landlocked countries, small islands. You don't see probably the names, but in the UN system, we are recognizing 48 LDC countries. We have 38 small island developing states, and they need the help. They need the help for various things because the natural disasters hit mostly these poor countries. If you look to some information, you see 2011, the biggest hit of the damage, 360 millions. So in last 10 years, if we look, it's 1.4 trillion of the damages. 1.7 billion people affected by these disasters. Roughly 700,000 people killed in just. And from this, if you look, the majority is coming from the disasters, the impact on the poor countries. We are trying to use space, which is one of the biggest challenges also, to help to the least developing countries in the space-based communication with connectivity, climate change monitoring, emergency communication, internet access, education, governmental communications to help ambulance, e-health, telemedicine, all these aspects. Why? Because please understand, the LDC countries, some of them have really a huge land size, and they have, in fact, no chance to build their terrestrial communication because they don't have infrastructure, they don't have roads, they don't have power distribution, they don't have fiber optic system. The only way is how to help them in the first round is to do a satellite communication, which is the best option. Same for the landlocked developing countries. Somebody say, oh, fiber optics from the sea, it's coming. Yes, but if they don't have direct access to the sea and they are 1,000 kilometers from the sea side, again, how to build the fiber optics which will come through the sea. And same for the small islands. In the small islands, a high number of islands, economically, it's impossible to build fiber optic submarine cables between hundreds of islands. Again, the only way and the biggest challenge for them is how to build a fast and efficient satellite communication. Same when disaster is coming, whatever is coming, earthquake, fire, the terrestrial system is damaged. This is the reality. Same, the cables, when there is an earthquake, cables are damaged. So the only way how to keep the communication and the mitigation and also the help to people is satellite communication, which is allowing line of sight connectivity immediately after when whatever happened. And the last thing, okay, somebody may say, this is very nice, but what about the high cost? Certainly, we try through our development bureau in ITU, but also in cooperation with the satellite operators, to have for the LDC countries space segment consolidation to allow reasonable, acceptable price for them to connect the not connected, which is a goal of ITU, which is a goal of the World Summit of Information Society, to connect the unconnected. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Attila. I'm sure you will not see ITU the same now that you see the type of thing that they are doing and not only banning the frequencies or that. Now that you have two views on domains, we'll go to a region, let's say a continent, a full continent, with Jörg Föstelbüchel. He spent, well, among other things, 21 years at ESA, being the director for space transportation and human space flights. And now that he has some more time, because he doesn't have to come to the office every day, he's become an advisor to the German aerospace organization, DLR, and to the Bavarian government. So I'm sure it uses up his time as much as when he was at ESA before. And he has a keen interest for Africa and how space could and should support. Jörg.
Thank you very much, Isabel. I'm, of course, an advisor to some governments, but I'm not talking to you as an advisor. I'm talking to you as a person that has worked 50 years in space, and now being retired, I try to have an unbiased view on the problems on our Earth and how space could help to solve these problems. And therefore I've started some while ago with an initiative which I call Space for Africa. That means the use of space technologies for emerging countries. Let me first of all talk about my motivation, or the motivation for proposing such a program. Presently there are 65 million people around the world escaping from war zones and from inhuman living conditions in many poor countries of the world. At the United Nations Sustainability Summit in September 2015, many countries declared to increase their efforts, and I cite it by word, to eradicate poverty in the world by the year 2030. And to this extent, they have actually declared that they would raise their support means from relatively low values to 0.7% of their GNP, which is a rather considerable amount of money. Africa is the continent with the poorest population. Many of its 58 countries suffer from lack of food, education, medical care, energy, water supply, and have no hope for improvement. In contrast, the high population growth leads to a drastic aggravation of the problem. We have a region which is called MENA, which is Middle East and North Africa. And if you have read the newspapers in the past days, they have 100 million unemployed young people. And if it continues like this, they will, by 2030, they will have 600 million unemployed young people. The primary target of present and future refugees from Africa is and will be Europe, because it is closest and nearest to their countries. I have stated that the European national and international space agencies are already to some extent active with limited initiatives, but I'm convinced they should do much more in view of the size of the problem and the tremendous potential of space applications. Let me talk a minute about the situation in Africa. Africa is actually the second largest continent with 30 million square kilometers and 1.2 billion inhabitants, and the strongest population increase worldwide, leading to a doubling of the population to 2.5 billion inhabitants by the year 2050. And if they continue that growth, it will be 4.5 billion by 2100. Such increase, not followed by an economic increase in the same order of magnitude, will lead to an even more uncontrollable stream of refugees. In the living conditions, if the living conditions are not substantially improving. Some experts expect more than 100 million refugees by 2050, and most of them will come to Europe. Among 229 countries worldwide, African countries occupy the last places with GNPs below $300 per year, which is as low as 1% of rich European countries. Among the 20 poorest countries, there are 18 African states. And according to the United Nations Human Development Report of 2014, African countries show the lowest Human Development Index, they call it, which is a function of life expectancy, education, and GNP worldwide, and they continuously fall back. And many countries in Africa live in conditions as in the 14th century in European countries. And in addition, through land grabbing, which takes place extensively in Africa, they have already lost 5% of their agricultural area, which is used by external companies primarily to produce biofuel. What can Europe do for Africa? I think Europe has, we have heard it many times here in this Congress, has achieved with telecom, navigation and Earth observation application programs a world-class capability. And I think these achievements allow European space agencies and industries now to support emerging countries in their effort to substantially improve their living conditions. Satellite-supported services can help in many areas such as education and instruction, agriculture and water management, medical services, Earth observation, meteo, and environmental protection services, navigation and transportation, telecom, crisis management, information technology, and many more areas. Space technologies can help to improve the living conditions in Africa. I propose that the European space agencies, the national ones and the international ones, should start immediately an extensive preparatory program for a substantial program with studies, with dialogues with emerging countries, with NGOs, and political discussions on the national and ESA and EU level. The preparatory effort should lead in a relatively short period of 1 or 2 years to a dedicated and comprehensive European space support program in cooperation with selected African partners to sponsor critical services and technology, in particular for education, agriculture, and medical support. The support for emerging countries in Africa is not only a question of financial resources and satellite data, it is foremost the development of sustainable local services together with African partners, for instance in providing educational tools for schools in rural areas, supply of agricultural data, and decentralized medical services. I don't know who has listened to Greg Weiler's presentation yesterday on the OneWeb, where he installs hundreds of thousands of small antennas on school buildings. I think that would be a fantastic starting point to actually promote more services and help to emerging countries worldwide and in particular in Africa. Let me conclude my short intervention. I think that after many years of developing basic space capabilities in science, launchers, and orbital infrastructure and so on, applications in telecom, navigation, and Earth observation have now reached a high level of maturity. Recent worldwide developments, for instance, terrorism, flight, migration, require measures from all developed countries. And I have followed the recent declarations of President Obama and Chancellor Merkel, where they have both actually strengthened their support to do something for African countries in order to provide better living conditions. And I am sure that space activities can help to improve security on Earth and to improve the intolerable living conditions in emerging countries. And Europe should take the lead to support African countries because they are closest to us and we have the highest responsibility for them. I think altogether, I'm all in favor of keeping visions for our space programs and communities like going to Mars, but I think we also need a major change of paradigm in space policy with increased emphasis on support for emerging countries, on improvement of security on Earth, and on new space and technology transfer. Let me conclude with a word of Nelson Mandela. It seems always impossible until it is done, and I hope very strongly that something is done for the poor emerging countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Jo. So you will recognize with me that it is a real challenge. I'm sure it's not only for Europe, because of course we are the closest, but all others. And let's try to see what we can do. I don't have the funding for this. I don't have anything in my pocket to give you, but okay, we'll see what can be done. And all the good ideas are welcome, of course, on that. And now just to conclude, I will pass the mic to Cristina Giannopapa. She's working at ISA, in fact, in the strategy department, so same department I am in. But she's here in her capacity of chair of the Committee for Liaison with International Organization and Developing Nations, of IAF, CLIODEN. I don't know how you pronounce it, but something around that. She worked, before ISA, she worked at SP and in the technical division department of ISA. And before joining ISA, worked for high-tech industries and has a lot of position in academia and still has position in academia. And she holds a PhD in engineering and applied mathematics and an MBA in international management. Cristina.
Thank you very much, Isabel, for this kind introduction. I have a very difficult task. I'm standing between you, my presentation, and the end of the session. So and something else happening very close around here. So I will try to be very brief. The Committee for Liaison with International Organizations and Developing Nations is a committee in the IAF which has got, among other tasks, the organization together with the United Nations of the UNIF workshop, which typically takes place just before the IAC starts. And I'm going to talk about that in the second part of this presentation. And the other element that the committee is engaged in is to organize global conferences related to space with other international organizations and partners. And this year we organized together with the ITU and my colleague here a conference in Geneva on Global Conference on Space and the Information Society. We had a number of discussions, and we heard today also in the panel that the amount of that space technologies and applications can help in a number of areas. And we have the possibility now to combine Earth observation, telecommunication, navigation, as well as Earth and airborne data in order to have a broader information society for the various benefits. So the idea was to see how we connect people and to look into the various aspects where space can help and the various policies related to it. We had 5 plenary sessions. One was in relation to the ITU activities. The second one was on the Sustainable Development Goals. The third one was on the economy, on the space economy. Then we focused on space and security, because we cannot be talking about satellite information and exchanges without engaging into the security aspects of it. And the fifth one was about the big data, the large amount of information that it is out there from the use of the various satellites. And on the left-hand side, you can see pictures from the various panels. Now, what were a little bit the conclusions from this global conference? I would invite you to look at the website of the IAF in order to download the full report if you're further interested. And I would like to underline 2 elements. The first one is that space and the information society can enable sustainable growth in developing nations, whether that is in Africa, as we heard from one of our colleagues, or to the Americas and in Mexico, as we have heard from various panels throughout the conference here. And the second element I would like to underline is that space can provide benefits through the different technologies, but in particularly through the integration of applications, as well as bringing together space technologies, airborne and in situ data coming from the Earth. This provides a wide spectrum of infinite possibilities of what we can do for the society. Now I would like to pass to the second part, where I would briefly want to let you know about the UNIF workshop that we had this year in Mexico, which started on Friday and ended on Sunday, with the title Integrated Space Technologies and Applications for a Better Society. What we have decided over the past years is to use the theme of socioeconomic benefits as an overarching topic to be used for the various UNIF workshops that are organized on a yearly basis with the IAF at the IAC. Now, I will be very brief on this to say that for the UN, one of the interests was through this conference to see how they could have the possibility to utilize the Unispace 50 that it is coming up to achieve progress on space capacity building and to get recommendations from the participants of the workshop. What were the topics discussed? Space and the global challenges, space for economic development, disaster management and early warning, health and education, and this year there was a particular topic bringing forward growing cities and populations, environment and biodiversity, and connectivity for reducing the social divide. I will very briefly get you through 4 conclusions. Yes, the conclusion from the participants was that the Unispace 50 is a great opportunity that we should use in order to strengthen the role of space for capacity building. The second one was to make that we should be stronger in making a link between space and the policy and decision makers. And that is something that is a task for all of us as a space community in order to be ambassadors and bring forward our voice in simple words to what space can do in a number of sectorial policies, being agriculture, being transportation, being urban development, a number of topics. The third one was that it is important to have continuity in capacity building. Often when a number of organizations are engaging in capacity building, and particularly in developing nations, the moment the project stops, there is discontinuity. It is essential that there is fundamental continuity to it and that this is brought forward. And the fourth one was that it came from the participants, the recommendation that there should be created a space solutions database. So bringing together best practices that we have seen in the space community so that others can learn from it and further be able to implement it. And so these were the conclusions. This will be further reported, and next year we will organize another UNIF workshop, and we are currently in discussions for the further global conferences. And with that, I would like to pass the floor back to Isabel, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Christina. And I can say that on the side of Visa, we are working on this type of solution and index and catalog. So you will hear about that, I think, soon. So I would like you to, now it's the end of a long day, well, maybe not the end for you, but to thank the four panelists here. I hope you have appreciated the information and got new information. And we'll have a good continuation of the conference, of the Congress. Good evening, bye.